Good morning, folks. Welcome back to the Food for the Faithful channel with your reluctant prophet. And I can tell you, I'm reluctant to tell you what I have to tell you today. This vodcast and vlog will be entitled Dr. Tam and Her Marxist Scam. By the 1930s, leading intellectuals from the Frankfurt School of Cultural Marxism rewrote Marxist theory. I've often mentioned this to you. They had come to realize that Marx's and Engels' communist theory was flawed, and that the proletariat was never going to spontaneously revolt against the bourgeoisie. Therefore, they rewrote Marxist ideology into a new socio-cultural doctrine known as critical theory. Today, critical theory is being taught all throughout the academy, particularly in the social sciences, and it has been for decades. This is why critical queer theory and critical race theory have become such a significant part of the prevailing woke agenda. Critical theory, however, still retains the dialectical materialism of Marx and Engels, which is why socialist leaders believe that life is essentially a zero-sum enterprise, which necessitates a centrally planned economy. This is also why the elite cultural Marxist political class claim that they alone are qualified to control it, despite them having no background in physical sciences such as engineering. A completely unqualified cadre of control freaks are seeking to dominate our natural resources, their refinement, the means of production of goods, services, and the distribution of such. Marxist theory, by necessity, must constantly morph itself into new versions, since its foundational premise is based upon fallacies, which is why central planning is a fool's enterprise. The market is too infinite and complex for any group of individuals to control it, since it is controlled in practice by entrepreneurs creating technology, private investors who dare to risk their capital by investing in innovation that hitherto didn't exist, and all the individuals who wish to purchase said innovations. No AI system on the planet could possibly compute the unpredictability of such an equation, since it involves the greatest variable of all, namely human choice. I know a former child studies professor from Brock University who is an avowed cultural Marxist. He once told me that a cultural Marxist revolution is taking place as he and his ilk march through every institution to capture them from within. Therein lies the secret of cultural Marxism, since it eats away at our institutions which are being hermit-crabbed, such that their shells may look the same, but the arthropods inside have become entirely different bottom feeders with an agenda at odds with our democratic freedoms. Richard Fadden, who served as CSIS director from 2009 to 2013 and was also Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's National Security Advisor from 2015 to 2016, recently penned a Globe and Mail column in which he expressed concern about the federal government's response to a shifting geopolitical environment, which he says includes the rise in an increasingly assertive China and Russia acting in total disregard of international law. In an article dated April 20th from the National Post written by Tristan Hopper entitled First Reading, Public Health Agency of Canada report calls for toppling of capitalism and liberty. The report's all-white authors identified themselves as uninvited land occupiers before calling for the wholesale decolonization of society in the interests of public health. Top story. A new Health Canada report suggests public health officials should be openly advocating for the toppling of capitalism, Western society, and even the very concept of liberty and individualism. Fundamental changes in our socio-economic structures are needed to rebuild our relationships with each other and with our planet, reads the conclusion of the April 17th report prepared for Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Theresa Tam. The paper, written by 3 authors who identify as white settlers, also recommended that Canadian public health actions should focus on decolonization, justice, and equity above all. The 72-page report, What We Heard, Perspectives on Climate Change and Public Health in Canada, was commissioned to detail the impacts of climate change on the health and well-being of people living in Canada. The authors surveyed 30 academics and public health experts for their inputs. There are indeed a number of emerging public health issues spurred by a warming climate, but one as example is an expansion of the ranges for disease-carrying mosquitoes, vastly increasing the number of people potentially exposed to malaria, dengue fever, and West Nile virus. I've got to interject here and I'll continue to read the article. I don't know where the hell they've lived. I spent my summers in Algonquin Park with my parents at the cottage of friends. And there were plenty of mosquitoes no matter how cold it gets up there. Anyway, back to the article. But the Health Canada report is careful not to get into specifics. There is no explicit mention of a condition or infectious illness that is expected to become worse in Canada as a result of climate change. Rather, the report features Canadian public health professionals explaining how they should focus on less tangible determinants, such as legal, colonial, and racist factors. If we don't address capitalism, if we don't address colonialism, racism, the patriarchy, etc., we're going to tread water for a long time until we eventually drown, reads one expert quoted in the report. End quote from article. There you have it. The organization led by the Chief Public Health Officer of Canada, namely Dr. Tam, a person whose heavy-handed COVID measures and inoculation policies, lockdowns, masking, school closures, and social distancing are now known to have failed. A CCP-controlled agent of Beijing has now outed herself completely for the communist she has always been. Her agency is now advocating for an end to democratic freedoms and capitalism with the full support of the Trudeau government in league with the NDP. Now, what makes cultural Marxist critical theory so insidious is that the nose-pierced, aposematic, hair-dyed, heavily inked woke crowd have no concept whatsoever as to the origins of their ideological possession, even as the freedoms which allow them to characterize the once freest, most prosperous, and most open nation on earth will be taken away by the very cultural Marxist revolution they are promoting. Here we can see how neo-Marxist crabs feed on their dying and dead fellows, just as real crabs do in nature. These are some things to think and pray about. Now, everything that I've been predicting, basically in written form since 2014, is here in black and white for everyone to read. And no one can state that I'm exaggerating, because this is in a health report published by our own government at our tax expense. One of the things that astounds me are how Christians will go to a twerking, reading where trans testicles go to public libraries to read their perversity to little children, and they stand there with bullhorns screaming at them. Although I laud their distaste for such, obviously, the grooming of children. It's unnatural, and it ought never to happen. But what these Christians fail to understand, no matter how often I've offered to help them understand the nature of this apostate ideology, is that until we can counter this ideological possession with gospel truth. Until we can offer the better ideas that Christianity has had that shaped the West for 2,000 years, we're not going to stop the cultural Marxist attack on our institutions. God bless you all. Have a great day.